channel. So I just got back from CrimeCon. I will have an entire video dedicated to that and my 1-year anniversary pretty much. It's going to be a very special video for me to create. There's a lot of emotions behind everything that I've experienced this past weekend, so keep an eye out for that. But today we are going to be talking about the abduction of Michaela Garecht. Now, this is going to be kind of a different take on the normal missing persons videos slash abduction videos that I create. I want to make a massive point before getting into Michaela's story. It has been decades since Michaela went missing, and I am not posting this video or, diving into it thinking that I'll be able to solve this case or that one of you will hear something that people somehow missed for decades. I know that I normally go into theories and try to bring my own theories and analyze everyone else's theories, but this won't really be happening on this particular video. Sharon, Michaela's mom, has been writing a blog for Michaela and to Michaela since she went missing, and she brought up a lot of things that will in particular benefit Michaela's case and benefit Sharon and the way that she kind of deals with losing her daughter and what we could do in particular to hopefully help bring Michaela home. Sharon is sure that at this point there is not a single bit of information that they already have that would crack this case wide open. They've looked at pretty much everything they possibly can, and since it has been decades, she just doesn't think there is going to be a new perspective that changes anything. She really believes that it's going to take either Michaela coming forward herself or someone to come forward and confess to the abduction. Sharon's main goal is to share Michaela's story. She has a blog where she explains everything. You really get to see her emotions, day to day, post to post, on how she was, feeling or coping with things or the new ideas that she has. But the main goal has always been to reach out to Michaela in case she is out there somewhere. That is my goal of this video, is simply to respect Sharon's wishes and do the best I can to just share Michaela's story so people remember the details of what happened, the story she might be still telling people decades later, just to the wrong crowd that doesn't know how to help her. So let's go ahead and jump right into what happened the day Michaela went missing. Michaela is described as tender-hearted and compassionate, and everyone that knew her said she truly was a light to this world. She was friendly and outgoing, and she was just a joy to be around. Michaela, unfortunately, was abducted when she was 9 years old on November 19th, 1988 in Hayward, California. The day that Michaela went missing was supposed to be filled with fun. It was the first day of Thanksgiving break. You know how it is when you go on break when you're in school, and it's the first day. You probably stayed up way too late the night before, and Michaela and her friend Trina wanted to ride up to the neighborhood store that was about 2 blocks away, known as the Rainbow Market, and it is now known as Mexico Super. They wanted to go get candy and soda. So her mother, Sharon, was very hesitant to even let her go. She had only gone to this particular store a handful of times, and it would just be her and Trina, so there would be no adult supervision. But the girls, again, filled with excitement, begged her, and after lots and lots of pleading, Sharon finally agreed to let them go. So both girls grabbed their scooters and headed off down the road. When they left, it was around 10:15 that Saturday morning, and within a couple of minutes, Michaela's mother heard screaming from the streets, and seconds after that, Michaela's father burst through the door, looked at Sharon dead in the face, and said, "Michaela has been taken." Panic set in, and Sharon immediately started dialing 911, and Sharon's husband set off for the store as fast as he possibly could. At this point, Sharon had no idea really what had happened. She just heard the screaming and the horrible words no mother wants to hear, that her daughter was taken. The 911 operator told her to stay at her home and wait for an officer to get there so the situation could be explained to her. Sharon describes this as the longest wait she's ever been put through in her entire life. After Michaela and Trina had left the home on their scooters, they reached the market fairly quickly and left their scooters by the door. They went into the store, they grabbed, I think it was beef jerky and Laffy Taffy and sodas, and they were so excited about this trip that they just made and break once again that they walked away from the store without even grabbing their scooters. They just completely forgot and the excitement of the moment. Once they realized that they had left their scooters behind, they quickly turned around, and when they got back, they noticed that one of the scooters was missing, and Michaela was the first one to spot it, just a few parking spots down from the door of the store right beside a car. Now, she went over to grab the scooter, bent down, picked it up by its handlebars, and as soon as she did that, a man in the car beside the scooter threw the door open, grabbed Michaela around her waist, threw her in the car, and sped out of the store parking lot down Mission Boulevard towards Union City. And Trina was sent in an instant panic. Everyone says they can remember the screams from that morning between Michaela screaming from being taken and Trina from witnessing her best friend be thrown into some stranger's vehicle. Trina ran into the gas station and she begged for help, and 911 was immediately called. The cops had even passed by Michaela's house on their way to the grocery store, with Michael and Trina's fathers following closely behind them. When they arrived, the officers explained what happened and the search began, but there's something that really slowed everything down, and something that we don't really have to deal with anymore. This was 1988. There wasn't security footage kept all the time. There was no Amber Alert, and these two things put together made it incredibly difficult to spread awareness about Michaela, or even see what the person looked like, what the car looked like, and the only witness was Trina, another little girl. They talked to Trina to try to figure out and get a composite sketch done of this man and figure out what car he was in. She described the man as in his 20s with long, dirty blonde hair. He had severe acne or possible pockmarks covering majority of his face, and his car was old and really beat up. It was a tannish, full-size sedan. It had possibly cement splatter all over the side of it, multiple dents like it had been in multiple accidents. They were unable to say the exact make or model of this vehicle. Michaela's case was highly publicized. Over 5,000 leads alone were sent in over the very first year and have consistently been sent in since. And I think to this day, we're sitting at about a little over 15,000 tips. That is a massive number. She was the first missing child to be shown on America's Most Wanted and was featured in at least a dozen other different television shows over the years. The case has had its ups and its downs, and as it usually goes, at one point or another, the police were blamed for not doing something right or this or that, but according to Sharon, they covered all the bases they possibly could right when Michaela went missing. So lack of effort is definitely not at the front burner on this particular case. Bars and neighborhoods and junkyards and repair shops were all checked just in case maybe this abductor decided to get rid of the car shortly afterwards, and not a single thing was found. Sex offenders were questioned, families in the neighborhoods, and not just adults, young children, teenagers. Everyone in the area was questioned to see if they saw this man, saw this car, saw Michaela, and it all led to nothing. The largest issue in this case, according to a lot of people that have looked into it, is actually that there was too much publicity, and that is not something we normally see or think is even a possibility in these cases. This case has honestly, kind of changed my point of view and really shown me personally a different perspective. Leads were coming in faster than they could even be handled. At this point in time, there was no computer system like we have today to put everything into, to keep everything organized. She had her own room in the police station that was filled with different filing cabinets that were stuffed and barely able to be closed because there were so many little handwritten tips on pieces of paper. There was no good way to organize any of this. The amount of leads in this case was just overwhelming. The police department did as best as they could with what they were given to go through as many leads as possible, and nothing was panning out. And while they seemed to be going through these leads, when you had thousands others more waiting, it just seemed like this endless task. Years went on and they kept searching, they kept checking out tips, and still it was going nowhere. But at this point, they were finally able to get a computer system, and there began the slow and tedious task of putting all of these different handwritten tips into the computer in a way that made some sort of sense. And what is so incredibly interesting to me is that despite the fact that this case was so widely publicized, you can't find that much of it anymore on the internet. I went and I looked, and the main sources are Michaela's mother's blog and places like Web Sleuth. There's no articles really out there left. Everything is just archived or it's been deleted. So I wasn't even able to find what searches they did, you know, the smaller bumps along the way, the smaller bits of information that might have been so incredibly important at one time. It now just seems to no longer exist. So the biggest place I had for information was Michaela's blog, and that is what I'm about to dive into now. As I said before, and as I learned through going on Web Sleuth, this case has such an enormous amount of theories out there, but majority of them don't really make much sense. And as Sharon said, and since I want to respect her wishes, I didn't want to go into all these crazy theories that seem to just be bogging everything up even more. One of the largest theories in the case was that she was a possible victim of the Speed Freak Killers. The Speed Freak Killers were a team of 2 men that are suspected of killing 20+ people during a drug-fueled rampage in the 80s and 90s. One of the Speed Freak Killers, Sherman Tyne, was on death row at the time, and he came forward saying that his partner, Herzog, that had killed himself after being released, looked like Michaela's kidnapper. Now, he stated that he knew absolutely nothing about Michaela's abduction. He referred to her as that Hayward girl, and he really had no knowledge or evidence at all. So he just brought forward claims of resemblance. Now, while this seemed hopeful at first, it was obvious fairly quickly that Sherman Tyne had very specific motives here. He had already received a decent amount of attention for speaking on other cases, claiming he knew other things. We've been through this before, where criminals really want to just talk about anything they possibly can and claim to know answers that they don't really, in hopes of having their sentence reduced or being paid money or, you know, given special gifts. There's all sorts of different reasons why criminals come forward with this information. He had given multiple locations of the Speed Freak Killer's favorite burial sites, and when they went and conducted these searches, most of the bones were of older teenagers and young 20s, but they did find one small bone that could have been the right size for Michaela. However, this entire excavation process was a mess of its own, and I'm considering just doing a specific video on just the Speed Freak Killers and the way all of the missing persons cases were handled, because the Waukegan County Police Department, so the area where these bodies were buried, they received a lot of legal and verbal backlash after they found this location because of Sherman Tyne and their way that they excavated the property and their handling of everything connected to all of it in general. Waukegan County refused to cooperate with any other department when it came to either helping solve or looking into the different Speed Freak Killer missing persons cases. They were even accused of deleting completely some of these missing persons files if they seemed to be linked to the Speed Freak Killers. Now, this was a huge issue in its own. When you have, you know, Speed Freak Killers, serial killers that don't normally stay in one county, that bounce around to different areas, you know, those different departments have to cooperate with each other. And when you have missing persons in one county and their body might possibly be buried in another county, and that county has jurisdiction to search but the other one doesn't, and they won't share any information, it is detrimental to these cases, and that is exactly what was going on here. They improperly excavated the area. I have even seen a few articles state that they used just a random company to bring in heavy equipment and dig the area up. They did not use forensic specialists. Because of this, remains were commingled. They had multiple different sets of remains all jumbled up together. They possibly destroyed some remains. At this point, they didn't really know where to stop, or, you know, there could have been more buried deeper down, and then they covered everything with concrete, which kind of ruined everyone else's chances for going to have a second look. It was just a huge mess, and Michaela's family was already dealing with so much. And again, as I said, because they kept being drug into all these different theories and there were so many tips to follow up, it was like whiplash for them. Michaela's mother, Sharon, even went and spoke to multiple families that were victims or were thought to be victims of the Speed Freak Killers, and she was trying to cope with the fact that her daughter might be one of them. But after 3 months of waiting and DNA test results came back, the bone did not belong to Michaela. And unfortunately, this was a huge blow to the detectives and to Michaela's family. Despite the fact that none of them wanted this to be the answer, it seemed like they had finally reached a huge possibility. And to have it go nowhere and then to deal with all of kind of the crap that went along with it for months, it was exhausting. Sharon said that it was such a blow to the department that they just kind of tucked all of her files away and everyone just backed away from the case for an extended period of time, just because of all of the frustration. Then there was the most investigated lead out of them all, and that was Philip Garrido, the man responsible for the JAYCEE DUGARD abduction, could have possibly taken Michaela as well. If you are not familiar with the JAYCEE DUGARD case, first of all, definitely go and watch KENDALLS' video. I will link it down below. She did an entire video on this particular abduction and imprisonment. But to give you a brief synopsis, JAYCEE was abducted in a very similar way to Michaela. She was, walking and was snatched into a vehicle, and a lot of people think they even resembled each other. JAYCEE was actually kept in the home of Philip Garrido and was moved to different outbuildings back behind the house and somehow was successfully kept hidden for an extended period of time. And when this story was circulating in the news, when JAYCEE was finally discovered and brought home safely, Trina, Michaela's friend that was there at the abduction, thought that one of the cars that she saw on the property possibly matched the one she saw Michaela being thrown into the day she was taken.
I saw a sketch of the car that was used in her kidnapping. I saw that on the news, and I called Michaela's mother and said, "Oh my goodness, have you seen this? Have we considered him as a suspect, because the car looks so similar to Michaela's kidnapper's car. The shape is remarkably like it in my memory." And since then I've seen photographs, actual video footage of the car being pulled away, and still I think the shape of the car looks a lot like the Michaela's kidnapper's car.
Trina also said that in this entire time she had not seen a photo that resembled the abductor as much as that of Philip Garrido. Since the home was only about 30 miles away from where Michaela was abducted and happened only about 3 years after JAYCEE was abducted, this was seen as a huge possibility. So the Hayward Police Department put together a massive search. They tore down all of the outbuildings on the Garrido property. They dug, they searched for anything possible. They thought maybe she was buried back there, or maybe if she had been kept back there like JAYCEE had, they would find something that belonged to her. But in their search, they found nothing. They even spoke to JAYCEE herself about Michaela, and JAYCEE also said that she did not believe Michaela had ever been on that property. Authorities wanted to question Philip and Nancy as well, but they were told they weren't allowed to until the case was over, which took about 2 years. And then after that, they were made to wait quite a few periods of time for Philip and Nancy to settle into their new prison home, which I find interesting, that they couldn't even question them until they were comfortable, these criminals. But anyways, when they were finally questioned, they said they had nothing to do with it, and they even offered to take a polygraph test to be ruled out completely, and they ended up passing, so they were no longer a suspect. But again, just like the previous theory of what might have happened to Michaela, this seemed like a huge one, and except this one, there was a massive possibility because JAYCEE was found alive, that Michaela would be found alive. And
I am hoping that this will lead to a resolution, and I'm hoping that it will lead to a positive resolution. I know that if JAYCEE DUGARD can be found alive and come home after 18 years, then my daughter can be found alive and come home after 18 years.
And, Trina herself said he looked possibly like the abductor, the car looked very similar, so it was this massive period of hope, only again to be shot down. This next theory of who possibly abducted Michaela sits very funny with me personally. There are quite a few mixed opinions out on the internet about this. Sharon herself does not think this person is responsible, but there are a ton of people and there is a ton of information out there suggesting that it could very well be otherwise. And this is about a man named Tim Bendner. Now, He is suspected by an absurd amount of people to be Michaela's abductor. Tim had an obsessive interest in many missing children, which is what ultimately led to him being seen as a suspect, not just possibly in Michaela's case, but multiple other cases as well. He had been fired from one of his jobs for using confidential information to send young girls birthday cards. When he was confronted about this, he told them that he just thought they were lonely. That's not the only thing he has done that has exhibited very strange obsessive behavior over young girls. I've seen something about him doing an interview at 4 in the morning in a graveyard. He would go and visit young girls' gravestones and talk to them, and he told people that he was psychic and could connect with them and that they were his friends. There are a lot of other bizarre things that he has done if you go and check his name out online. However, I could not confirm any of them, so I don't want to say them here personally. But the biggest thing is that he did not match the description of the abductor, and according to Sharon, because of his obsession, he actually showed up that day to help in the search for Michaela. And according to Sharon, he didn't look like someone who had just kidnapped a little girl. Now, I completely respect her opinion. She was the one who was there. I respect that. I will say there are very many cases where someone who has abducted someone, murdered someone, puts themselves into the middle of an investigation. And it could be, minutes to hours after they commit the heinous crime that they do, just as a big F you to everyone out there and as this reward, in a sense, for themselves. So I understand that he might not have looked like he just abducted someone, but there really is no telling. I spoke personally to someone this weekend who had a serial killer in her family, and she spent years thinking nothing of this person when, sometimes he might have come to hang out at a family event only having just killed someone hours before. You really don't know sometimes. So I do think he exhibited very strange behavior, and there are a lot of people who really do think it's just chalked up to him being a very highly disturbed individual. But I did see something interesting, that he was never actually labeled as a suspect formally, or even person of interest by the Hayward Police Department themselves. I know he did sue successfully one police department for defamation of character, so maybe that's why they're staying away, but he definitely has acted bizarrely. But that is one of the biggest trending theories out there because of his very unusual behavior. So now on to one of the other theories that Sharon shared. This one is probably the one I find most possible, and that is about Richard Hellwig. Now, I cannot personally find anything about Richard other than one article online that doesn't match up with any of the other information that I've seen. So I do want to preface this by saying all of this information in specific is from Sharon herself on her blog. I will again have it linked down below. Usually I try to find more than one source on something, but for this particular one, I couldn't really find anything. So it's definitely a less known lead, and it's one that happened very, very early on, because it began in March of 1989, so just a few months after she was abducted. Hellwig had been stopped at a border crossing from Mexico to the United States, and he was found with child pornography in his possession. But not only that, he was found with Michaela's missing persons flyer along with another young girl's missing persons flyer. Now, I saw on Sharon's blog that Hellwig had a girlfriend in Mexico that had 2 deaf children, and then I saw on the article that I found that, wasn't the best sourced article that I've seen, that said basically that one of the items, some of the child pornography, was tracked back to a young deaf girl in Mexico. But according to Sharon, there apparently are claims out there that Hellwig's girlfriend has a pair of earrings and a shirt that matches what Michaela was wearing the day that she was abducted. But none of these items were ever found, so that could have just been a rumor or claims to make it make sense. I'm not exactly sure. But according to Sharon as well, both girls were questioned, and she was told by authorities that they were questioned separately, and each girl by themselves, unprovoked, without talking to the other, said for a fact that both Michaela and the other young missing girl from the missing persons flyer had been at their home at one point. But no evidence was ever actually found to prove any of this, and again, I can't even find articles speaking about this at all. But he actually was put into prison because of the child pornography, and on his deathbed and multiple times before that, authorities came and questioned him about Michaela's case over and over and over again. He would never confess to any involvement in either case, but he also never ever denied it. Sharon has said that this has been the most intriguing lead to her, and after reading a ton of them online and on her blog, I have to absolutely agree. The fact that he had Michaela's missing persons flyer in his vehicle, and one of the girls back in Mexico claims that she had been at their home, and the fact that there are claims that his girlfriend was wearing her earrings and her clothes, I mean, even though evidence wasn't found, which is a massive part in, finding someone as guilty, there are just a lot of coincidences here that I find very, very interesting. He obviously distributed child pornography. I don't think it's that outlandish to say he possibly involved himself in trafficking. He was going from the United States to Mexico. That right there is already a huge flag of potential trafficking. Also, if you look back to Michaela's abduction in general, someone knew what they were doing when they took her. This wasn't someone that happened to see a girl walking on the street and just grabbed her. This person knew that these girls got there on their scooters. It's not like these girls took this trip frequently, so this person couldn't have planned to hope to see them there, if that makes any sense. But, they placed the scooter exactly where it needed to be to easily and successfully get Michaela thrown into the vehicle. I feel like this person had probably done this before. And, I don't know, just something about this particular idea and theory that Richard had something to do with it, I don't know. I get an interesting vibe off of it. There have also been many tips sent in that Michaela is in the UAE, which is the United Arab Emirates, and again, that would fall in line well with trafficking. I know there's a lot of people out there who say that, everyone who goes missing, everyone assumes it's trafficking. But this particular case, there is a massive chance because there were multiple tips saying that she was trafficked. And keep in mind, this man had her missing persons flyer. He went from the United States to Mexico. From there, it would be easy to transfer her wherever they really wanted her to be. So I think it's highly, highly likely. And according to Sharon, that's actually one of the main reasons she has her blog. Just in case Michaela can get her hands on it, there is an entire page dedicated to Michaela on how exactly to get home from Mexico, the UAE, everywhere that there's been a tips in it that she might be. She has instructions on how to safely get herself out of the situation. As I said before, there are so many other theories in this case, and I will leave that to you guys to go and check out, but those are just the largest ones that have received the most attention and that Sharon specifically wanted to address. And I even left out a few that were on her blog just because they kind of seemed like over talked about theories that didn't really make any sense. I just learned so much from reading Sharon's blog. You see a different perspective because there's just not a lot of parents out there or loved ones who are brave enough to write about their experiences and share what their emotions might be at the time and the wild ride that they go on from start to possibly never a finish. I highly suggest any of you that are interested in seeing things from a different perspective to go and check out her blog. I really hope she realizes how much she might be helping other families that are going through a similar thing and how eye-opening she's been for me so far, and possibly all of my subscribers and other people who cover very sensitive subjects like true crime, missing persons cases, murders. It's a whole different world. Seeing something from the other side and seeing their most vulnerable moments and, you know, what exactly is crossing through their mind, the things we're normally questioning and having to assume and guess. It was very, very interesting. She said quite a few things on her blog that I never had thought of, like the fact that she's very against age progressions. She says that, you know, if she doesn't recognize her own daughter years later on the streets, the chances that someone else would are slim to none. And when you're looking at an age progression photo of someone who went missing as a child, the drastic changes that happen, they might get features wrong. You know, while I agree that age progressions can be beneficial, and I have seen quite a few that have matched almost perfectly, and again, in this case, kind of just sent the wrong people coming forward. People are claiming that, you know, this person looks similar to the age progression, and since everyone does kind of see it as a possibility, people can focus on one of those features and just go crazy with it. And I've seen this personally myself when I've gone and looked through web sleuths and a bunch of different sleuthing websites where someone will post a picture and say, hey, this is the progression, and then there will be an entire thread of dozens of people that very obviously don't look like the age progression picture, but we just obsess and focus again on small things. And I know people want to help, but at the same time it could be hindering, and this is a prime example of that happening. There's obviously a massive chance that Michaela is no longer living, but there are still so many other reasons to suggest that she is, and she just needs help. So because of that, obviously her mother wants to share anything possible internationally. She says to share the links of her blog, you know, maybe her childhood photos, but mainly just her story, because she said that despite, you know, all this time passing, and despite the fact that she might be a different person or not remember specific things, everyone has a story, and the chance that she's going to forget the moment in her life that changed her entire life is slim to none. And she might not know where her home is or how to get there or who to call or who to ask or her family members' names, but that moment more than likely is stuck in her mind. And if she can just hear her own story, or someone has heard someone speak of something similar, you never know what can happen.
I just want to say, Michaela, if you're out there somewhere within the sound of my voice, I just want you to know that we love you, we miss you. There's nothing that could possibly have happened over the last 20 years that could change that, and we want you to come home.
On January 24th of this year was Michaela's 39th birthday, and her mother wrote a beautiful and heartbreaking at the same time excerpt for her on the blog. And one thing that really stood out to me, and that would be my one piece of everything that I would want Michaela to hear, is this quote by her mother. "Let me remind you that you were born with a light that was bright enough to light the world even in your absence. And do not doubt that you have love and support enough to accomplish miracles." Every year on the anniversary of Michaela's abduction, ribbons are tied to the tree where she was thrown into the vehicle and taken away from the people that loved her. There's also a $10,000 reward from the FBI for any tip that leads to the arrest and conviction of Michaela's abductor. If you have some time, please go and head over to Sharon's blogs. They are two separate blogs. She had an original one, Dear Michaela, and then moved it over to something different. She does speak on other things that were happening in her life as well. She has been through cancer, and, you know, she just offers this, you know, wealth of knowledge and perspective that a lot of us don't normally get to see. And so it was very eye-opening. Hopefully Michaela is out there somewhere, and it just takes her knowing that she has people here to catch her when she falls out of whatever situation she may be in, to get her to come forward and leave safely. Or hopefully whoever has done something to her will finally come forward and admit to it, so this family can have closure. But as for now, just share her story as far as you possibly can, and hopefully there will be some answers eventually. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Hit the thumbs up button and the subscribe button to become a member of the Helen fam so we can bring them home together, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye.